The crystal chandeliers of Club Epsilon cast a warm glow over the private poker room, where Ryan Thompson sat among leather chairs and mahogany tables. The room smelled of expensive cigars and aged whiskey. 5 other men, all wearing suits worth more than most people's monthly salary, lounged around the green felt table. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. Ryan adjusted his platinum watch, more out of habit than necessity. At 35, he had already amassed enough wealth to never work again, though he continued to make deals simply because he could. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored Tom Ford suit fit like a second skin. "Raise you 50,000, Mark Stevens said, pushing a stack of chips forward. Mark had been Ryan's best friend since their days at Yale, though their friendship was built more on mutual benefit than genuine affection. He ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, a tell that Ryan had learned to read years ago. Ryan looked at his cards again. A pair of kings. "Call," he said, matching the bet with practiced indifference. The dealer revealed the river card, and Ryan's kings held up. As he reached for the pot, Mark's laugh cut through the room. "You know what would make this interesting." Mark's eyes had that dangerous glint that appeared whenever he was about to suggest something outrageous. "Let's make a real bet." The other players leaned in, sensing entertainment brewing. Ryan took a slow sip of his 20-year-old scotch. "I'm listening. That woman who works in your building, the cook. What's her name?" "Chloe." Mark's smile widened. "Marry her, 1 year. No divorce." The room erupted in laughter. Ryan had seen Chloe Williams in the service elevator a few times. A plus-sized black woman who always seemed to be carrying grocery bags or cooking equipment. She was as far from his usual type as possible. "And what do I get for this charitable act?" Ryan asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Mark pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and showed Ryan the screen. A banking app displayed an account balance with several zeros. 5 million, tax-free. Consider it a wedding present. Ryan shouldn't have even considered it. He had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. But something about the challenge, the sheer audacity of it, sparked his interest. Plus, it would be simple enough to have the marriage annulled later. His lawyers could handle that without breaking a sweat. "Terms?" Ryan asked, signaling to the bartender for another round. 1 year of marriage. You have to live together. Make it look legitimate enough that no one suspects it's arranged. After the year's up, do what you want. Divorce her. Set her up with a nice settlement. Whatever makes you feel less guilty. Mark's words drew more chuckles from the audience. Ryan studied his friend's face, looking for the catch. "And you're willing to put 5 million on this? Consider it entertainment expenses." Mark raised his glass. "So, do we have a deal?" The next morning, Ryan stood in the lobby of his building, waiting. He'd instructed his assistant to find out Chloe's schedule. She always arrived at 7:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast for some of the building's elderly residents, a service they paid her for directly. When she walked through the front doors, arms full of grocery bags, Ryan noticed details he'd previously ignored. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her size, she moved with a certain grace. Her clothes were simple but clean and professional. Black pants, a white chef's coat, comfortable shoes. "Ms. Williams," he called out, enjoying how she startled at his voice. "A moment of your time." She turned, and for the first time, Ryan really looked at her face. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently filled with suspicion. "Mr. Thompson, is there a problem with my use of the service elevator?" "No, nothing like that." He flashed his most charming smile, the one that usually melted resistance. "I have a business proposition for you. Would you join me for coffee?" Chloe shifted her grocery bags, her expression unreadable. "I have clients expecting breakfast in an hour. This won't take long, and it could be very profitable for you." Ryan gestured toward the building's cafe. "Please." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. following him to a quiet corner table. Ryan watched her arrange her bags carefully before sitting down, noting how she kept her spine straight despite her obvious discomfort with the situation. Little did Ryan know that this conversation would be the beginning of a series of events that would completely upend his carefully ordered world. The St. Regis ballroom sparkled with excess. Crystal vases overflowed with white roses and orchids, while champagne fountains caught the light from thousands of tiny bulbs. Ryan had spared no expense. If he was going to do this, he'd do it properly. The guest list included New York's elite, most of whom whispered behind their hands about the unlikely couple. Chloe had accepted his proposal with surprising ease. Almost too easily, Ryan thought, watching her from across the room. She wore a custom Virawang gown that hugged her curves before flowing into a dramatic train. Her makeup was flawless, hair styled in elegant coils, and she carried herself with unexpected poise. "You've outdone yourself," Mark commented, appearing at Ryan's side with 2 glasses of champagne. "Though I have to admit, your bride cleans up better than expected." He handed Ryan a glass, smirking. "For more months and 11 grand events like this, and that 5 million is yours." Later that evening, in a secure office building across town, Chloe sat in front of 3 FBI agents, her wedding dress replaced by a practical black pantsuit. The wedding ring on her finger caught the fluorescent light as she reached for a file. "Thompson's inner circle is exactly where we need to be," Agent Garcia said, spreading photographs across the table. "His friend Mark Stevens is just the tip of the iceberg. We've tracked money laundering operations through at least 6 of the companies represented at your wedding today." Chloe nodded, studying the photos. Ryan suspects nothing. He thinks this is all about money. His friends bet. His ego makes him blind to anything else. She paused, considering her next words carefully. "But he's not directly involved in the criminal activities. At least, not knowingly." "That's not our concern," Director Phillips interjected. "Your job is to get close enough to gather evidence on the entire operation. Thompson's ignorance or complicity will be determined later." Back at the penthouse apartment they now shared, Ryan watched Chloe move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. She'd insisted on cooking, claiming she couldn't stand his personal chef's bland food. He had to admit, the aromas filling the space were intriguing. "You don't have to keep up the cooking act," he said, leaning against the counter. "The wedding's over. You've got your own wing of the apartment. We only need to appear together at social functions." Chloe looked up from the pan she was stirring, her expression unreadable. "I enjoy cooking. It's not an act." She plated something that looked far too sophisticated for someone he'd assumed was just a basic cook. "Besides, maintaining normalcy is important for appearances, isn't it?" Ryan found himself studying her more closely. Her movements were precise, almost tactical. She never wasted emotion, never seemed flustered. Even now, in casual clothes with her hair pulled back, she carried herself with that same self-assured grace he'd noticed at the wedding. "You're different than I expected," he admitted, accepting the plate she offered. "People usually are," she replied, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "We all have our masks, Mr. Thompson. Some are just more obvious than others." As days turned into weeks, Ryan noticed other things too. The way Chloe always seemed to be exactly where important conversations were happening. How she asked casual but specific questions about his business associates. The late-night phone calls she took in whispered tones on the balcony. During a charity gala, he caught her in what appeared to be an intense conversation with someone he didn't recognize. When he approached, she smoothly transitioned into discussing menu plans for their next dinner party. The stranger disappeared into the crowd before Ryan could get a good look at him. "Business acquaintance," Chloe explained with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's interested in my catering services." Ryan nodded, but something nagged at him. The way she held herself in that conversation hadn't been that of a caterer talking to a potential client. It had been different, more like the stance he'd seen in his own corporate negotiations. That night, As he watched her sleeping in their separate bedroom through the partially open door, Ryan realized he'd never actually verified anything about her background. He'd been so caught up in the ridiculousness of Mark's bet that he hadn't bothered to look deeper. Who was Chloe Williams really? And why did he suddenly care so much about finding out? Ryan stared at the family portrait hanging in his private study. His father stern in an expensive suit, his mother perfect in pearls, and himself, at age 12, already learning to wear the Thompson mask of success. The frame's gold finish caught the afternoon light, making the image seem even more artificial. "Your father built quite an empire," Mark commented, entering without knocking, as usual. He carried 2 crystal tumblers of scotch, offering one to Ryan. "Remember when we were kids, and he used to quiz you about stock prices at dinner?" Ryan took a long sip, remembering those tense meals. Investment principles before dessert, corporate strategy instead of bedtime stories. His finger traced the rim of the glass. "Failed a math test in 4th grade, and he made me spend the entire summer with tutors, while other kids were at camp. Made you who you are though, didn't it?" Mark settled into one of the leather chairs. "Speaking of your continued education, how's married life treating you? 3 months down, 9 to go." Before Ryan could answer, his phone buzzed with a security alert. The cameras showed Chloe entering the building's gym, the 3rd time this week, at exactly 5 a.m. He'd assumed she was trying to lose weight, but the regularity of her schedule seemed almost regimented across town. In a modest brick house that had seen better days, Chloe sat at her mother's kitchen table. The linoleum was peeling at the corners, and the air smelled of old grease and disappointment. "Still playing dress-up with the rich folks?" her mother asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I saw those wedding pictures in the society pages. All those fancy clothes can't hide what you are, baby girl." Chloe's fingers tightened around her mug. "And what exactly am I, Mom? You know what I mean. Men like that, they don't marry women like us for real. Not unless they want something." She paused, studying her daughter. "You never did tell me how you managed to catch his eye." "Maybe I'm just that good a cook," Chloe replied, her tone carefully neutral. She'd perfected that tone over years of undercover work, though her mother didn't know that, couldn't know that. The kitchen's yellow walls held faded photos of a younger Chloe, always slightly apart from her thinner, lighter-skinned cousins at family gatherings. She'd learned early that being different meant being invisible, and she'd turned that invisibility into an asset. Later that evening, Ryan found Chloe in their kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables. Her usual precision was off, suggesting something had upset her normally unshakable composure. "Bad day," he ventured, surprising himself by caring about the answer. Chloe's knife paused mid-chop. "Family stuff," she said finally. "Nothing important." "Family can be complicated," Ryan offered, thinking of his own perfectly curated childhood. "My father once threatened to disinherit me because I wanted to take a gap year before college. Did you take it?" "No." Ryan leaned against the counter, closer than he usually allowed himself to be. "Enrolled in Yale's business program instead. Made the old man proud." "And what would have made you proud?" Chloe asked, her eyes meeting his with unexpected intensity. The question caught him off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. "I wanted to study photography," he admitted, the truth surprising even him. "Travel the world, capture moments instead of assets." Something shifted in Chloe's expression, a flash of genuine interest, maybe even understanding. "I wanted to be a dancer," she said quietly. "But mothers have expectations too." For a moment, they stood in shared silence, the wall between them slightly thinner than before. Then Chloe's phone buzzed. Another late-night message. Her face immediately closed off, the professional mask sliding back into place. "I need to take this," she said, already moving toward the balcony. Ryan watched her go, noticing how her casual walk transformed into something more purposeful once she thought he couldn't see her. He pulled out his own phone, thumbing through his contacts, until he found the number for his most discreet private investigator. "I need everything you can find on Chloe Williams," he said quietly. "School records, employment history, family background, everything." "Any particular reason?" the investigator asked. Ryan watched Chloe's silhouette on the balcony, her hand gestures suggesting an intense conversation. "Let's call it due diligence," he replied. "Very, very delayed due diligence." What he didn't say was that, for the first time in his life, he actually cared about the truth behind someone's facade. That somewhere between the bet and now, Chloe had become more than just a means to win $5 million. She had become a mystery he desperately wanted to solve. The investigator promised results within days. Ryan ended the call, unaware that his own investigation was about to collide with a much larger one where he wasn't the hunter, but the hunted. The penthouse kitchen had become neutral territory. Ryan found himself there more often, watching Chloe work her culinary magic. Tonight, she was preparing something that filled the air with complex spices he couldn't name. "You're hovering again," she said, not looking up from the pan. "Either grab an apron or get out of my kitchen." "Your kitchen." Ryan raised an eyebrow, but found himself reaching for the spare apron anyway. "Pretty sure I bought this place." "You bought the space. I made it a kitchen." She handed him a knife and some vegetables. "Dice these, small and even pieces." Ryan studied the knife in his hand. He couldn't remember the last time he'd prepared food himself. "I have people for this sort of thing. And now you're people too. Dice." He started chopping awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. Chloe corrected his technique occasionally, her hands guiding his to show the proper angle. Each touch lingered a fraction longer than necessary. "Not terrible," she commented, inspecting his work. "You might survive if your chef ever quits." "I've survived worse." Ryan gathered the diced vegetables. Board meetings with hostile investors, merger negotiations, Yale's dining hall food. Chloe laughed, a genuine sound he'd rarely heard from her. "Somehow I doubt you ever ate in a dining hall. You'd be surprised." He watched her add his vegetables to the pan. "There's a lot you don't know about me." "Same here," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. Ryan noticed how her shoulders tensed slightly, how her stirring became more mechanical. Later that evening, they sat at the kitchen island, sharing the meal they'd prepared together. Ryan had dismissed the staff, claiming he wanted to practice his new culinary skills. In reality, he'd begun to treasure these rare moments when they could just be. "This is actually good," he admitted, taking another bite. "Though I'm pretty sure I can't take much credit." "Don't sell yourself short. Those vegetables are perfectly diced." Chloe's smile faltered as her phone buzzed again. The third time during dinner, she glanced at it, her expression shifting subtly. "Important call?" Ryan asked casually, though he'd catalogued every such interruption over the past weeks. "Just work." She put the phone face down. "Some clients are needier than others. Must be some demanding dinner parties you're planning." He kept his tone light, but watched her reaction carefully. "Funny though, I haven't heard about any major events in our circle lately." Chloe's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I have clients outside your social circle, Ryan." "Of course." He took a sip of wine. "Though I'd love to hear more about them. Maybe I could help expand your business connections." "My business is doing fine without the Thompson touch." There was an edge to her voice now. "Not everything needs to be part of your world." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ryan set down his glass carefully. "No, but marriage usually involves some sharing of worlds, doesn't it? Even marriages of convenience." Chloe stood abruptly, gathering plates with military precision. "Is that what this is? Sudden interest in your convenient wife's career? Would it be so strange if I was genuinely interested?" Ryan moved to help clear the table, intentionally invading her space. "You're not exactly what I expected, Chloe." She turned to face him, their bodies inches apart. "And what did you expect, Ryan? A simple cook, grateful for the chance to play Cinderella. Someone who wouldn't question why a man like you would marry so far beneath his social station. That's not, isn't it?" Her eyes blazed with something that looked like anger, but felt like fear. "We both know why you married me. 5 million reasons, if I remember correctly." Ryan felt the conversation spiraling out of control. The bet might have been the reason, but things have changed. Have they? Chloe's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. She glanced at it, and Ryan saw genuine conflict cross her face. "Take it," he said quietly. "Whatever it is seems urgent." She hesitated, then grabbed the phone. "I need to go out." "Don't wait up, Chloe," he caught her arm as she passed. "Whatever's going on, whatever you're involved in, you can trust me." For a moment, something raw and honest flashed in her eyes. Then her professional mask slammed back into place. "No, Ryan, I really can't." She left him standing in their kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of their shared meal, and the growing certainty that he was missing something crucial. His own phone chimed. A message from his investigator. "Found something. Meeting tomorrow. You need to see this." Ryan stared at the message, then at the door through which Chloe had disappeared. He had a feeling that tomorrow would change everything. He just wasn't sure if he was ready for what those changes might bring. Ryan sat in his private investigator's office, staring at the photos spread across the desk. Each image told a story that contradicted everything he thought he knew about his wife. Chloe at a shooting range, displaying perfect form. Chloe meeting with known federal agents. Surveillance photos spanning years of operations. "Your wife, James Wheeler," his pie said carefully, "doesn't exist. At least, not the version you know. Chloe Williams has a paper trail that goes back 15 years, but it's too perfect. No parking tickets, no credit card debt, not even a late library book. It's the kind of background that gets manufactured for undercover operatives." Ryan picked up a photo of Chloe at what appeared to be a federal building. FBI, Senior Special Agent Chloe Williams. Specialized in deep cover operations focusing on white-collar crime and organized criminal enterprises. Wheeler leaned back in his chair. "She's been investigating your friend Mark Stevens for the past 2 years. You were never the target, Ryan. You were the access point." The words hit like physical blows. Every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every moment he'd thought they were growing closer. Had it all been tactical? "There's more," Wheeler continued, sliding another file forward. "Your company's been unknowingly laundering money for an international criminal organization. The paperwork looks legitimate because it's coming through companies owned by people you trust, including Mark Stevens." Ryan's world tilted on its axis. "You're sure? The evidence is solid. Your signatures on some of the documents, but they've been doctored. Someone's been using your reputation and companies to clean dirty money. The FBI isn't after you. They're after everyone around you." Back at the penthouse, Ryan found Chloe in their kitchen, preparing dinner as if it were any other evening, as if she hadn't been systematically infiltrating his life for months. "Interesting day at the shooting range?" he asked, watching her freeze or should I say, Special Agent Williams. Chloe set down her knife with deliberate care. When she turned to face him, her entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the careful vulnerability she'd shown recently. In its place stood someone altogether more dangerous. "How long have you known?" Her voice was calm, professional. "Just found out today, though I should have seen it sooner." "You're very good at what you do." He poured himself a drink. "Was any of it real?" "The mission is real." She moved away from the counter, positioning herself strategically near the door. "Your friend Mark is part of an organization that's been using legitimate businesses to launder money for drug cartels and human traffickers. Your companies are involved, Ryan, not by choice." He took a long drink. "But you already knew that, didn't you? That's why you married me, instead of having me arrested. We needed access to your inner circle. These people trust you, talk freely around you." She paused. "Around your wife and the cooking, the late-night conversations, the moments when you seemed to actually care." His knuckles were white round his glass. "Were those part of the mission too?" Something flickered in Chloe's eyes. the first genuine emotion he'd seen since the conversation began. Not everything was a lie, Ryan, but this isn't about us. Mark is planning something big, something that could implicate you in ways you can't imagine. So tell me. Ryan set down his glass. Tell me everything, right now, or I walk into the FBI office tomorrow morning and blow your entire operation. You wouldn't. Try me. He stepped closer. You've had months to learn about me, Chloe. You know I protect what's mine. Right now, that includes my companies, my reputation, and, God help me, whatever this thing is between us. Their standoff was interrupted by Ryan's phone ringing. Mark's name flashed on the screen. Don't, Chloe started, but Ryan had already answered. Hey Mark. No, just having dinner with my wife. His eyes locked with Chloe's. Actually, we were just discussing some interesting business opportunities. Why don't you come over? Bring the papers for that new venture you mentioned last week. He ended the call, watching Chloe's face drain of color. What have you done? She whispered. Mark's not just going to walk into a trap. No, Ryan agreed. He's going to walk into his best friend's home for dinner. And then you're going to tell me exactly what kind of game we're really playing here. Both of us. No more masks. Chloe's hand moved toward her phone, probably to alert her team, but Ryan caught her wrist. Not yet. First we talk. Really talk. Because whatever happens next, we're in this together now. The sound of the elevator arriving echoed through the penthouse. Mark was early. Of course he was. He'd always been able to sense when something big was about to happen. Time to choose, Agent Williams, Ryan said softly. Do we face this as partners or opponents? The elevator doors opened, and Mark's footsteps echoed through the penthouse. In those few seconds before his arrival, Ryan and Chloe's eyes met in silent communication. Without a word, she stepped back into her role as the doting wife, though this time, Ryan could see the precise calculation behind every movement. Something smells amazing, Mark called out, rounding the corner into the kitchen. He carried a leather briefcase, the one Ryan had seen at countless business meetings. Now he wondered what it really contained. Just trying a new recipe, Chloe replied smoothly, her hand brushing Ryan's arm in a perfectly choreographed display of casual intimacy. Would you like a drink, Mark? Scotch, if you're offering. Mark's eyes darted between them, and Ryan recognized the subtle assessment in his friend's gaze. Had he always been this observant, or was Ryan only noticing it now that he knew what to look for? Ryan moved to the bar, hyper-aware of every gesture. The usual, always. Mark settled at the kitchen island, placing his briefcase carefully beside him. You mentioned business opportunities on the phone. Actually, Ryan began, handing him the drink. I've been thinking about expanding into new markets. Maybe something more international. Mark's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly around the glass. Interesting timing. I was going to discuss something similar. The papers I brought, would those be the same papers that authorized transfers through shell companies in the Cayman Islands? Ryan kept his voice casual, even as he felt Chloe tense behind him. Or are we talking about the ones that have my forged signatures? The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Mark set his glass down with deliberate care. I see. His gaze shifted to Chloe, who had stopped pretending to cook. And how long have you known about your wife's real occupation, Ryan? Long enough. Ryan moved slightly, positioning himself between Mark and Chloe. The better question is how long you've been using my companies to launder money for criminals. Criminals, Mark laughed, but it held no warmth. We prefer the term alternative business ventures. And let's be honest, those ventures have helped fund your perfect life for years. You never complained about the exceptional returns on certain investments, because I didn't know they came from drug money and human trafficking. Ryan's composure cracked slightly. Mark stood, his movement deliberately slow. Come on, Ryan, you're smarter than that. You chose not to know. It was easier that way, wasn't it? Just like it was easier to marry someone for a bet then admit you were lonely. Step away from the briefcase. Mark. Chloe's voice had shifted into something authoritative. Keep your hands where I can see them. Or what, Agent Williams? Mark smiled. You'll blow your cover. Risk months of investigation. We both know you don't have enough evidence yet, or you would have moved already. Ryan watched the exchange, his mind racing. Everything he'd built, everything he'd achieved, was balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move and it would all collapse. The bet, he said suddenly. That's why you arranged it, isn't it? You needed me distracted while you used my companies for bigger operations. Partially, Mark admitted, though watching you fall for your own wife has been an unexpected bonus. Very entertaining. Hands on the counter. Now, Chloe ordered, as Mark's hand drifted toward his briefcase. Ryan, Mark's voice turned serious. Think about what you're doing. We've been friends for 20 years. Everything I've done has benefited you. Do you really want to throw that away for someone who married you as part of an FBI operation? The words hit their mark. Ryan felt the weight of 2 decades of friendship pressing against the few months he'd known Chloe, but those months had shown him more truth than years of Mark's carefully constructed lies. What's in the briefcase, Mark? Insurance. Mark's smile returned. Enough evidence to implicate you in everything. Every transaction, every deal, every decision that might look suspicious to federal investigators. Your signatures on all of it. Forged signatures, Ryan countered. Can you prove that? Are you willing to spend years in court trying to? Mark reached for the briefcase. Or we could handle this the way we always have, as friends, as partners. Ryan felt Chloe move closer, her presence both comforting and complicated. He had seconds to decide. Trust the woman who had lied about her identity but shown him genuine connection, or the friend who had protected him for years while secretly undermining everything he'd built. Whatever you decide, Chloe said quietly, make sure you can live with it. Ryan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with newfound clarity. The bet's off, Mark. He moved to stand beside Chloe, and so is everything else. Mark's face hardened. Wrong choice, old friend. His hand moved to his jacket pocket. Very wrong choice. The next few seconds would change everything, and Ryan had no idea if he'd survived them. In the split second before Mark could reach his pocket, Chloe moved with practiced efficiency. Her hand produced a small pistol from somewhere under her chef's apron, while her other arm pushed Ryan aside with surprising strength. That's a dangerous move, Mark, she said, her voice steady. Especially with the FBI surveillance team watching this building. Mark's hand froze. You're bluffing, am I? Chloe's smile was cold. Check your phone. Notice any interference patterns lately? Strange echoes on calls. We've been monitoring you for weeks. Ryan watched Mark's confidence waver slightly. He'd seen that same hesitation during high-stakes business negotiations. It always preceded either a retreat or a desperate move. The briefcase, Ryan said quickly, hoping to prevent the latter. Put it on the counter and step back. You know what happens if I do that. Mark's hand remained near his pocket. Everything comes out. Every deal, every connection. Your reputation won't survive it. Maybe it shouldn't. Ryan moved carefully around the kitchen island. Maybe it's time for everything to come out. The elevator chimed unexpectedly. All three turned toward the sound as the doors opened, revealing 2 of Mark's security team. Men Ryan had seen around for years, but now viewed with new suspicion. Everything all right, Mr. Stevens? One of them called out. Actually, Mark began, but Ryan cut him off. Everything's fine, just discussing some business proposals. Ryan forced a laugh. Though I think we're done for tonight. Right, Mark? The moment hung in the balance. Chloe had somehow managed to conceal her weapon, but her posture remained combat-ready. Mark glanced between his security team and the briefcase, clearly calculating odds. For tonight, Mark agreed finally, reaching for his briefcase. But this conversation isn't over. No, Ryan said quietly. It isn't. After Mark and his team left, Chloe immediately pulled out her phone, speaking rapidly into it in what Ryan recognized as coded language. He sank onto a kitchen stool, the adrenaline leaving his system. "We have maybe 12 hours, Chloe said after ending the call. "Mark will secure his position and come back with something bigger. Then we have 11 hours to plan." Ryan stood, his business instincts kicking in. "Tell me everything. No more secrets." Over the next hour, in Ryan's secure home office, Chloe laid out the entire operation. She pulled up files on a secure tablet, showing Ryan the web of connections his company had unknowingly become entangled in. "The organization uses legitimate businesses as fronts," she explained, highlighting various corporate structures. "Your companies are perfect, successful enough that large transactions don't raise flags, respected enough that few questions get asked, and Mark's been orchestrating all of it." Ryan studied the complex financial flows. "He's one of the key players, but not the top." Chloe pulled up another document. "We believe he reports to someone higher up, someone with connections to both the criminal world and legitimate business circles. That's who we really want." Ryan traced the money trails, his years of business experience letting him see patterns he'd missed before. "These transactions, they're using my shipping subsidiaries in Asia. I can help track them." "It's dangerous," Chloe warned. "Once we start pulling these threads, there's no going back. They've been using my name, my companies, my reputation." Ryan's voice hardened. "I want them stopped." They spent the next several hours developing a plan. Ryan's knowledge of business operations combined with Chloe's investigative experience created a strategy that neither could have devised alone. "We'll need access to the executive database," Chloe said, sketching out a timeline. "Mark will expect us to move against him directly, but if we can trace the higher level connections." "There's a board meeting tomorrow afternoon." Ryan pulled up his calendar. "All the key players will be there, including some overseas partners calling in. Mark arranged it last week. Perfect timing." Chloe's eyes lit up with professional interest. "We can monitor who he contacts before and after. My team can know." Ryan touched her arm. "Let me handle the business side. Your team can't navigate those waters without raising suspicion. I know these people, their patterns, their weaknesses." "And what about your weaknesses?" Chloe asked softly. "These are your friends, your colleagues." "Were," Ryan corrected. "Everything's different now." They worked through the night, fine-tuning their approach. Ryan provided access to his private servers, while Chloe set up secure communication channels with her FBI team. As dawn approached, they had a workable plan, risky, but with potential for significant impact. "There's one thing we haven't discussed," Ryan said as they finished their preparations. "Us, this marriage. Was any of it real?" Chloe paused in her typing. "Parts of it became real," she admitted. "More than they should have. And now we focus on surviving the next 24 hours. She met his eyes. "After that, if we're both still here, we can figure out what's real and what isn't." Ryan nodded, understanding the priorities. They had a plan to execute, an organization to expose, and very little time to do it. Personal feelings would have to wait. As they prepared to put their plan into motion, Ryan couldn't help but appreciate the irony. He'd married Chloe because of a bet, only to find himself betting everything he had on her now. The next few hours would determine not just their survival, but the future of everything Ryan had built. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he was playing the game or being played. The Thompson Industries boardroom gleamed with polished mahogany and old money. Ryan sat at the head of the table, watching faces both present and on video screens. Every person here had been carefully vetted by Chloe's team overnight. The results were staggering. Nearly half had connections to Mark's operations. "Before we begin," Ryan announced, adjusting his tie clip, now containing a sophisticated FBI recording device, "I'd like to discuss some irregularities in our Asian shipping operations." Mark, seated to his right, shifted almost imperceptibly. "We should stick to the agenda, Ryan. The overseas partners have limited time. This won't take long." Ryan opened a file on his tablet, sharing it to the room's displays. These transactions caught my attention, particularly the routing through our shell company in Singapore. One of the video feeds flickered, a board member in Hong Kong suddenly developing technical difficulties. Ryan noted the timing, another piece of the puzzle. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Mark suggested, his casual tone belied by the tension in his shoulders. Actually, Ryan continued, I'm curious about the authorization codes used for these transfers. They appear to have my signature, but I don't recall approving them. The room temperature seemed to drop. Several board members exchanged glances. Mark's hand disappeared beneath the table, and Ryan knew he was reaching for his phone. Right on cue, all communications in the building went dark. Chloe's team had timed it perfectly. What's happening? Someone demanded. Technical issue, Ryan said smoothly. Security protocol automatically locks down communications during potential data breaches. Speaking of which, he pressed a button on his phone, and the boardroom doors clicked shut. We're now in secure mode. Mark stood abruptly. This is unnecessary. Sit down, Mark. Ryan's voice carried an authority he'd never used before. We both know what's on those servers. The only question is how many people in this room were aware of it. The Hong Kong feed had frozen on a panicked expression. 2 board members were trying desperately to open the doors. Mark remained standing, his facade cracking. Think carefully about your next move, Ryan advised. FBI teams are currently executing search warrants at 17 locations connected to our overseas operations. Your emergency protocols have been compromised. Your backup servers are being seized. And your private accounts, well, let's just say they're not so private anymore. You have no idea what you're doing, Mark hissed. The people behind this will be very interested to know you're sitting in a room full of recording devices. Ryan suggested that every word you've said for the past 12 hours has been documented, that your insurance briefcase has already been copied and analyzed. Color drained from Mark's face. How? You're not the only one who can plan ahead. Ryan stood, facing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this company has been used for money laundering, drug trafficking, and human trafficking operations. Evidence has been provided to federal authorities. Anyone who cooperates now will receive consideration. Anyone who doesn't. The doors burst open. FBI agents flooded the room, led by Chloe, now dressed in a tactical vest with her badge visible. The transformation from cooking enthusiast to federal agent was striking. Mark lunged for his briefcase, but Ryan was ready. Years of racquetball and tennis had kept him in shape, and he moved faster than Mark expected. The briefcase skidded across the floor to Chloe's feet. Mark Stevens, she announced. You're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. The sound of breaking glass interrupted her. One of the board members had smashed a window with his chair. Before anyone could react, Mark shoved Ryan aside and sprinted toward the opening. 40 stories up, he couldn't possibly. A helicopter roared into view outside the broken window. Mark grabbed a hanging ladder that seemed to appear from nowhere. Ryan watched in disbelief as his former best friend swung out into empty air. Buildings surrounded. Chloe snapped into her radio. All units converge. Target is attempting aerial escape from North Face. Ryan rushed to the window, watching the helicopter bank sharply between buildings. For a moment, it seemed Mark would escape. Then smoke began pouring from the helicopter's tail. A precise shot from somewhere had hit something vital. The aircraft lurched, spinning wildly, while Mark clung to the ladder. Get back. Chloe yanked Ryan away from the window as the helicopter attempted an emergency landing in the plaza below. The sound of screeching metal and breaking glass filled the air. When they looked again, the helicopter lay on its side, emergency sprinklers creating a curtain of water around it. Mark was being pulled from the wreckage by tactical teams, his expensive suit torn and bloody but still alive. You, okay? Chloe asked Ryan quietly. He watched as his oldest friend was handcuffed and led away. Ask me tomorrow. The boardroom had descended into chaos. Some were surrendering quietly, others demanding lawyers. One woman was openly crying, another frantically trying to delete files from her phone before it was confiscated. Mr. Thompson, a senior FBI agent, approached. "We'll need you to come with us." "Your statement can wait 15 minutes, Chloe interrupted. "He's a cooperating witness who just helped bring down an international criminal organization. Give him a moment to process." The agent nodded and withdrew. Ryan sank into his chair, surveying the wreckage of his corporate empire. Everything he'd built, everything he'd believed in, was being dismantled before his eyes. "It can be rebuilt," Chloe said, reading his thoughts. "The right way this time. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. "About Mark, about all of it. Would you have believed me?" She touched his shoulder gently. "Sometimes people need to discover the truth for themselves." Outside, sirens wailed and reporters gathered. Ryan's phone, now reconnected, was exploding with messages and calls. The world was about to change dramatically. But for now, he just sat there, watching federal agents dismantle his boardroom, while his fake wife, who'd become somehow real, coordinated one of the largest white-collar crime busts in recent history. "What happens now?" he asked finally. Chloe checked her tactical radio, then gave him a small smile. Now we follow the money." Mark wasn't the top, he was just the beginning. The FBI's downtown offices hummed with activity at midnight. Ryan sat in an interrogation room, his tie loosened, watching surveillance footage of Mark being processed. His former friend hadn't said a word since his arrest, maintaining a silence that made everyone nervous. "He's waiting," Chloe said, entering with 2 coffee cups. She'd changed into business attire, but her badge and gun remained visible. "Mark knows his only leverage is information about the person above him." Ryan accepted the coffee. "The one you really want. We've been calling them the architect." Chloe spread photographs across the table. "Every time we get close, the trail goes cold. Multiple identities, shell companies within shell companies. They've been operating for decades." Ryan studied the photos. Elegant charity galas, political fundraisers, corporate events. In each one, different faces were circled. "These are all the same person. We think so." Extensive plastic surgery, identity manipulation. They hide in plain sight, moving through the highest social circles. She paused. "Your circles, Ryan." A knock interrupted them. Agent Garcia entered, looking grim. "Mark's asking for Ryan. Says he'll only talk to him." Chloe shook her head. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. I'll do it." Ryan stood, straightening his jacket. "He'll try to manipulate me, but I might see something you miss. I know his tells." The holding cell was stark and bright. Mark sat at a metal table, his expensive suit replaced by orange prison wear. He looked smaller, somehow less imposing. "The great Ryan Thompson," Mark said, as Ryan sat across from him. "How does it feel to betray 20 years of friendship?" "About the same as it feels to have 20 years of friendship turn out to be a lie." Ryan kept his voice neutral. "What do you want, Mark?" "To warn you." Mark leaned forward. "You think you've won. You think taking me down makes you safe. You have no idea what's coming. Then tell me." Mark smiled thinly. "They're going to take everything from you. Not just your company or your reputation. Everything. And your FBI wife won't be able to protect you." "Who are they, Mark? Who's the architect?" A strange look crossed Mark's face. Fear mixed with something else. "You've met them multiple times. They've been watching you for years, waiting to see if you could be trusted. The bet wasn't my idea, Ryan. It was a test. One, you failed spectacularly." Ryan's mind raced through years of meetings, parties, business deals. "Give me a name." "Better watch your mother's charity foundation," Mark said instead. "Lots of interesting transactions there. Ones that could ruin her reputation completely. Would she survive that kind of scandal at her age?" Ryan's hands clenched under the table. "Are you threatening my mother?" "Just offering friendly advice. For old time's sake." Mark sat back. You have 24 hours to release me and withdraw your testimony. After that, well, I'd hate to see anything happen to the Thompson family legacy. Ryan left the cell, his mind churning. Chloe was waiting outside with her team. He threatened my mother's foundation, Ryan said, without preamble. We need to, already on it. Chloe showed him her tablet. We've had a team monitoring all Thompson family assets since this started. Your mother's security detail has been doubled. The foundation transactions are being traced. But Ryan, she hesitated. The patterns we're seeing, they go back decades. Long before Mark was involved. The implications hit him like a physical blow. No, she wouldn't. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, Agent Garcia read from a file. Founder of multiple charitable organizations. Board member of 6 international banks. Connected to every major political and business figure in the city. And her financial records show irregular patterns identical to the ones we've been tracking. Ryan's world tilted sideways. My mother is the architect. We need to move now, Chloe said urgently. Before she realizes Mark talked. He didn't. Ryan's business instincts kicked in. He wanted me to make exactly this assumption, to rush in without thinking. My mother's being set up. How can you be sure? Because I know who it really is. Ryan pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos. Someone who's been at every major event, but never in the spotlight. Someone who could move through all circles without drawing attention. He showed them a photo from a charity gala. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight for years. Chloe's eyes widened as she recognized the figure in the background. That's impossible. No, Ryan said grimly. That's the perfect cover. And they're expecting us to go after my mother while they clean up loose ends, including Mark. Alarms suddenly blared through the building. Agent Garcia's radio crackled. Security breach in holding. Prisoner Stevens is down. Repeat, Prisoner Stevens is down. They rushed to the holding cells. Mark lay on the floor, foam at his mouth, his last expression frozen in terror. Building lockdown, now, Chloe ordered. No one in or out. But Ryan knew it was too late. The real architect was already gone, leaving them with a dead prisoner and a trail of false leads. His mother wasn't the target. She was the next victim. We need to get to the Thompson estate, he said urgently. Now, as they rushed out, Ryan's phone chimed with a text. The number was blocked, but the message was clear. Wonderful party tonight at your mother's. Shame you'll miss it. Give Chloe my regards. The real game was just beginning. The Thompson estate loomed against the darkening sky, its manicured gardens eerily quiet. Ryan and Chloe approached with a tactical team following at a distance. The annual charity gala was in full swing inside, orchestra music drifting through the windows. Your mother's security team isn't responding, Chloe said, checking her phone. Internal cameras are down. There's another way in. Ryan led them toward a hidden side entrance. My father's old study has a private access point. He was paranoid about security. As they moved through the shadows, Ryan's mind raced through the evidence. It was there all along. Every major event, every crucial meeting, always in the background, watching, gathering information. Ryan, Chloe touched his arm, stopping him. We need to be sure. If we're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. He met her eyes. Gregory Phillips, my mother's butler for the past 30 years. The perfect cover, who pays attention to the help, who questions their presence in any room. He's been orchestrating everything, using his position to gather intelligence on every powerful family in the city. They reached the study window. Inside, the room was dark except for a single desk lamp. Eleanor Thompson sat in her husband's old chair, facing the door with unusual stillness. Mum. Ryan moved to enter, but Chloe pulled him back. Mrs. Thompson, a familiar voice, spoke from the shadows. I trust you've had time to consider my offer. Gregory Phillips stepped into the lamplight. Gone was the servant's careful stoop, the deferential manner. He stood straight, commanding, his accent now crisp and aristocratic. I considered it, Eleanor replied. her voice steady. The answer is still no. Such loyalty to your son, Gregory sighed. Even after learning how he betrayed his oldest friend, how he married a federal agent, the Thompson name is already tainted. Eleanor, let me help you salvage what remains by using my foundation to launder your blood money. Eleanor's laugh was cold. I've known what you were for years, Gregory. Why do you think I kept you close? Ryan and Chloe exchanged shocked glances. Through their earpieces, they heard the tactical team confirming positions around the house. Ah, Gregory smiled. So the Ice Queen shows her hand at last. And here I thought I was the only one playing a long game. He moved to pour himself a drink. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies? Did you think I wouldn't? Eleanor pressed a button under the desk. Hidden panels in the walls slid open, revealing dozens of servers and monitors. 30 years of surveillance footage began playing. Gregory, in various disguises, meeting with criminal organizations, orchestrating deals, ordering executions. What do you think the guests downstairs would say? Eleanor stood. Every powerful family in the city is here tonight. Your entire network gathered in one place. One press of a button, and everything plays on every screen in the house. Gregory's composure cracked slightly. You'd destroy yourself too. The foundation is clean. Ryan stepped through the window, Chloe beside him with her weapon drawn. Has been for years. Every suspicious transaction was carefully documented, traced, monitored. Right, Mum? Eleanor smiled at her son. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of how deep the corruption went. Your father suspected Gregory years ago, but could never prove it. After your father died, mysteriously, I knew I had to continue his work. Touching family reunion, Gregory sneered, his hand moving toward his jacket. Don't, Chloe warned. It's over, is it? Gregory looked at Ryan. Your mother's been lying to you your entire life. She used you, just like I did. The only difference is I admitted I was a criminal. No, Ryan moved to stand beside his mother. The difference is, she was trying to protect people. You were destroying them. Such certainty. Gregory's smile turned vicious. Did you never wonder why your father really died? Why Eleanor was so eager to keep me employed afterward? Ask her what really happened that night. He was threatening your father, Eleanor said quietly. I overheard them arguing about the foundation's accounts. Your father had discovered irregularities. Gregory poisoned his drinks for weeks, making it look like natural causes. I couldn't prove it then, but I knew. So I kept my enemies closer than my friends. For 15 years. Ryan asked. For you? Eleanor touched his cheek. To protect you. To ensure that when we finally brought him down, it would be complete. No escape routes. No contingencies. How very theatrical. Gregory's hand suddenly moved, producing a small remote. But I still have one card to play. The charges in the ballroom. A shot rang out. Gregory staggered, the remote falling from his bleeding hand. Chloe stood with her weapon raised, smoke curling from the barrel. You talk too much, she said. The tactical team swarmed in through windows and doors. Gregory was secured, his wounds treated. As he was led away, he turned to Ryan one last time. Ask her about the bet, he called out. Ask her who really suggested it to Mark. Ryan looked at his mother, who met his gaze steadily. I needed you to meet Chloe, she admitted. The FBI had approached me months earlier. We knew we needed someone on the inside of your social circle, someone Gregory wouldn't suspect. The bet was convenient. You orchestrated my marriage. Ryan looked between his mother and Chloe. Did everyone know except me? I knew you were a target, Eleanor said, but I didn't know about Mark's involvement until Chloe uncovered it. Everything that happened between you two, that was real. Unexpected, but real. Chloe holstered her weapon. The mission was real too. So were my feelings. Still are. The sounds of the gala continued below, the guests unaware of the drama that had unfolded above them. Ryan looked at the three people who had shaped his life so dramatically, his mother, who had spent 15 years working to avenge his father, his wife, who had entered his life as a lie but become an unexpected truth, and Gregory, the man who had been playing them all while hiding in plain sight. "Well," he said finally, "I guess this means our one-year marriage contract needs some revision." Chloe smiled. "Are you proposing again, Mr. Thompson?" "Depends. Are you still undercover, Agent Williams?" "Not anymore." She took his hand. "This time, everything's real." Eleanor watched them with satisfaction. Gregory was right about one thing. The Thompson name will never be the same after tonight. "Good," Ryan said, pulling Chloe closer. "It's time for some honest changes." Below, the orchestra struck up a new song. The gala continued, its guests unaware that above them, a decades-long game of deception and revenge had finally ended. A new chapter was beginning, one built on truth rather than lies, on love rather than convenience, on justice rather than power. And somewhere in the FBI evidence room, a briefcase full of betting money sat forgotten, its purpose long since transformed from a cruel joke into the catalyst for something unexpectedly real.